That was apparently done by the students, too. They told me that they had. They also had some other stuff from some local folks. So it's great to be at Palm Beach State College. Good to see everybody. We're here today with the First Lady, my wife Casey, and Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo. So thanks for them for being here. And you know, as you can see, we're here to talk about the Healthy Florida First initiative that has been spearheaded by the First Lady and the Surgeon General. You know, I'm kind of along for the ride on it, but they have done a lot of really important testing of some core kind of consumer food products that I think has been illuminating for a lot of Floridians to be able to do. So the first thing that they did was baby formula. And they did through the Department of Health. They tested 24 infant baby formula products that are sold both online and in stores in the state of Florida. They reviewed samples from 7 major brands, and they were looking for both heavy metals and pesticides. And we released those results earlier this year. And while pesticide levels were thankfully generally below levels of concern, the testing identified elevated levels of certain heavy metals compared to health-based screening benchmarks, including mercury, arsenic, and lead. And so what they were able to do was they were able to create a website, be able to list all the different brands, and then just put the testing results that had happened so that people can make their own decision. And people really appreciated that and were able to see. Then the next step was to test candy. And I just held my breath because I didn't want them to ding Reese's Cups. I'm like, come on. And the results, actually, Reese's Cups and Hershey are good. Because we were in, I spoke at some event in Hershey, Pennsylvania at one point, probably within the last 6 or 9 months. And so I'm doing that. But since we're in town, you know, Casey and the kids are there, and they have Hershey Park, and they have the Hershey Chocolate Factory, and you can actually go in and make your own chocolate bar. And so you pick this and that, so our kids are loaded up all this other stuff, and it's really big. You design even the cover of it and everything like that, and honestly, it's kind of like a cool memento. And so, you know, I told the kids, I see, you guys can save that. That'll be something you could always look back on, that memento. By the time we got home, they had all eaten their candy bars, and so that didn't work out. But anyway, so some of the ones that people were concerned about, you know, ended up doing pretty good. But they tested 46 different candy products from 10 different companies. Arsenic was detected in a number of those products, and that obviously raises questions about exposure for kids. And so those you know, results were posted. And so the website for the Department of Health for consumers to look is exposingfoodtoxins.com. So if you go in, you have both of those two, and then you will have the results of today. So today is about testing bread. And, you know, DOH applied the same independent science-based testing standards that were used in the infant formula and the candy reviews to test bread products, and that's what we're here to announce the finding today. And so I'll let both the First Lady and Dr. Ladapo expound more on that, but I think this is something that a lot of people will appreciate. You're being able to find, you know, it's like, there's so much stuff. There's obviously a lot of issues with whatever, you know, is sold in a supermarket. You know, you have some that's like, you know, very fresh and natural. You have others that may not be as much. You know, some stuff places are making from scratch. You know, we profile these restaurants around Florida, and you know, we do the family restaurants, and they're all making this. They make the stuff from scratch. I mean, that's kind of what it used to be, but then you end up having some of these other iterations. So people just should have a right to know how to do that. And so really, you know, this is the third announcement we've made. But I can tell you the First Lady and Dr. Ladapo, they've been working on this now for many, many months. And I remember sitting in on meetings, they have this, they have that. And there was a lot of legwork that went into making sure that they were doing it the right way, in a way that really was scientifically rigorous, and that's what they've been able to do. So without further ado, we will bring up the First Lady.
Well, I appreciate you being here. And, this one really hits home, and he's right. We've been working with the Surgeon General day in and day out to really provide transparency and accountability for moms and obviously for families to make informed decisions, right? And it hit home for me, particularly today, because I have a little one, a 9-year-old, who is a little bit under the weather. Maybe she was like playing onto a little bit more just to stay home from school today, but, she was a little under the weather. And I asked her, I said, what do you want me to make you for lunch? And she goes, I want you to make one of your famous grilled cheeses. Now, I don't think that they're famous, but she seems to think that they are, so I'll take credit for it, right? But as I was going into the pantry and I was getting out the products and I was getting out specifically the bread, I was thinking about it. You go into the grocery store, you go into these places with this expectation of trust that what you're buying on the store shelves is not contaminated with pesticides and heavy metals. And so I was really trying to think through with the bread and the other products. Man, I do so much for my kids, right? I don't like the phones. I don't like the social media. I try to protect them. I try to do everything to educate them well with our values and our principles and all of this. And you never really think about the food that they're consuming. Could that potentially have, ramifications on their health? Because you don't know what are in some of these products. And frankly, I don't think that that's fair to consumers to buy something without knowing entirely what's in it, pesticides and or otherwise. He had mentioned the baby formula, something we started off with because, quite frankly, these are the youngest among us. They're the most vulnerable. This is all that they're consuming, particularly the first year or two of life. And so again, I remember going into a grocery store, walking down the aisle, picking out which one as I needed to start supplementing, which one was the best one. I'm reading the labels, trying to do the best that I could. But there was no disclosure of lead, arsenic, cadmium, or mercury on any of those baby formula containers. I would have made an informed decision. Clearly, I wouldn't have given that to my child if I thought that that was problematic. So that was just something, that resonated with me. And then the candy. I mean, my goodness, with the kids, right? It's like you go into the candy, you go a CVS or a Walgreens, and you're shopping for this, that, or the other, and they're pulling at your shirt sleeve because they want candy, and you just want to acquiesce and know how bad is, one piece of candy. One piece of candy, obviously, on one day, not problematic. But when you start looking at some of the evidence that the Florida Department of Health has uncovered about eating this stuff in aggregate over a course of a year, it becomes problematic. So a simple thing is trying to provide a candy bar to a 5-year-old who you just want to get through the experience without causing a scene, right? So you think, you're giving it to them. Of course you don't want to do any harm to your child. And so that's why informing consumers with the truth, with what a fair and impartial, non-biased third party like the Department of Health can do to be able to provide that guidance to parents so that way they can make informed decisions, that's the right thing to do. And so it's a righteous fight. And I'm really honored to stand next to the Surgeon General, who, by the way, the greatest Surgeon General in the United States of America. I mean, honest to goodness, he's top notch because he has your back, and there is no doubt about that. He's willing to fight the good fight. So the governor had mentioned we went through the baby formula, we went through the candy, and now we're turning our attention to something else, and bread. Why? Because this is something that a lot of people are consuming day in and day out, hence my world-famous grilled cheese that I made this morning that, for whatever, it's fine. But I made that this morning for Madison. And these breads were tested for a wide range of substances, including heavy metals and pesticides, other chemical contaminants, to provide a broader picture of what consumers might be exposed to. And as the Florida Department of Health really began reviewing a lot of this data, looking for context and perspective, right, because that's really important, one finding for them really kind of jumped off at the page, and that was the levels of glyphosate. Glyphosate is a weed killer. It's the main ingredient that you find in Roundup and other weed-killing brands. It's designed to kill plants. It is not meant to be eaten. The labels on glyphosate-based pesticides clearly warn that the chemicals are harmful and must be kept out of reach of children. In fact, they include emergency instructions for accidental exposure and make clear these products are not meant for people to touch, not meant for it to be into the food, and certainly not meant to be consumed. And yet, here we are today with these findings. An independent testing from certified third-party labs found triple-digit glyphosate levels in several widely consumed brands, including Nature's Own Butter Bread, Nature's Own Perfected Crafted White, Wonder Bread Classic White, and Sara Lee Honey Wheat. In contrast, Sara Lee Artisano White and Pepperidge Farmhouse White had no detectable glyphosate levels. So once again, and we've seen this in every category that we have tested, whether it's the baby formula or the candy, there are problematic levels of some of these contaminants. And then in that same category of food, there are some that don't have any detectable levels. So what does that tell us? There is a right way to do it without these chemicals getting into the food supply. There is a major disconnect between a chemical labeled as unsafe to ingest and its quiet presence in everyday food like bread. This is exactly why transparency and accountability matters. Consumers deserve to know the truth and to make informed decisions about what they consume. And that is one of the big reasons about why we are on the mission that we are currently on. And the Surgeon General and I have said multiple times, we're just getting warmed up. We're doing this, we're doing baby formula, candy, we're doing bread, and we're going to move on to other things because people have the right to know. So in closing, I think it's important to say this. Florida has really made historic investments in cancer care and research, over $1 billion under his watch, to expand treatment, innovation, and care. We are becoming an international destination for cancer treatment. We are home to the only carbon ion therapy in the entire Western Hemisphere here in the state of Florida. We are funding innovative grants that are bringing in new technologies and treatments to Floridians that otherwise might not ever reach patients. We have also committed millions of dollars to pediatric care and research so that the littlest among us don't feel like they have to leave the free state of Florida to be able to get help for cancer. Those investments matter. Those investments are saving lives, and as a cancer survivor, those investments are deeply impactful and personal to me. But the treatment alone, in my opinion, is not enough. If we really truly want to improve health outcomes, we have to give prevention the same amount of priority as we do treatment. Reducing the exposure to harmful chemicals, especially those that show up in everyday foods, is one of the most powerful ways to potentially and hopefully prevent disease before it ever takes root. Keeping these chemicals out of the food supply is not just good policy, it's also common sense. And that accountability is exactly what taxpayers, I believe, deserve from their government. And through this initiative, Florida is embracing the role of states under the Federalist system. States are laboratories of innovation, uniquely positioned to act quickly, gather real-world data to identify emerging risks. And this is why Florida is actively, as we speak, enlisting other states to join this effort to conduct independent, trusted testing to serve as a trust but verified check on our food supply. Working together, states can really serve as a force multiplier for the federal MAHA movement, generating the transparency and verified data upon which the FDA needs to be able to respond effectively. And that is true. The FDA really looks for problematic instances within the food supply, and then they're able to swoop in and hold people accountable. But what we need to do is be able to bring this to their attention through a coalition of the states to ensure that we can provide, again, that trust but verify factor to ensure the integrity of the food supply for you, for the people, for Floridians, for the American citizen. And this is how federalism is supposed to work. States taking the lead so that families are protected and public health decisions are grounded in evidence and in truth. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's just the right thing to do on behalf of the people who deserve to know the truth, to make informed decisions. And as a mother of 3 and a cancer survivor, I am very proud to be a part of this and proud to be a part of something that I hope will be a game-changing moment in our nation. Thank you.
Well, first, before I say anything, I just want to officially say that even though Governor DeSantis was sampling some of the bread out there, it will not affect the contents of my talk. So, and it smells delicious. There's no question about that. There's just nothing like freshly baked bread, and it smells amazing. Yes. So, very grateful to be in this position as a Surgeon General, thanks to the governor and the opportunity to work with the First Lady. And she's very passionate about this, and it's extremely important. I mean, it's so important. We spend our lives eating while we're here, and the choices that we make about what we put in our bodies, certainly there's the immediate effect, right? Delicious food, nothing like it, but there are also long-term effects, and it's a challenge, right? No one's perfect, but we do know Secretary Kennedy has talked a lot about this, and it's totally true. I mean, there's just a lot of chronic disease out there, and we've seen chronic disease increase among children, and there are a lot of question marks. Why is it? Why are we seeing more cases of cancer in young people? Why is this autoimmune disease prevalence just out of control, especially among women? I mean, it's totally out of control, the prevalence of autoimmune disease. Why do so many kids have autism, especially boys? There really is there's been a real substantial increase in chronic disease, autoimmune illness, cancers in young people that we don't have good explanations for. But almost certainly it has something to do with the environments that we live in. And that includes everything that we breathe, things that we drink, things that we consume and eat, things that we are exposed to that we can't even see, like these things that are inseparable from us. So we've done some exploration of baby formula. I think we've provided some really important information to Floridians about ways that they could make some better choices. One of the things that really stood out there was mercury, but the governor mentioned some other. I think one or two of the samples were elevated in lead, which obviously isn't good. A few of the samples were elevated in cadmium also. With the candy, I know that was a real nail biter because of some of the candies that we looked at. I still love them. I just don't really eat them anymore. But I used to love my Reese's Pieces. I mean, chocolate and peanut butter. You can never go wrong in my book with that. And fortunately, as the governor said to I was relieved when I saw this. That fortunately the results were good for the Reese's, but they were really bad for a lot of other candies. And what the Jolly Ranchers, Nerds, some of the Twizzlers, Laffy Taffy. Basically, I mean, what I took from it was, if it's a color that doesn't exist in nature, you probably shouldn't eat it. I don't know where the arsenic is coming from, and I wish we could say it was just a small amount of arsenic, but we were finding high levels of arsenic. To put it in perspective, compared to the bread, the amount of arsenic in the candy was at times 30 times or 40 times higher. Like, how are they getting so much arsenic in these candies? But most importantly, I mean, as a parent, I'm certainly not going to put that in my body, and I don't want my kids putting that in their bodies. So I hope that we've helped some Floridian families in that way. So now, the most recent thing that we've tested is bread that we're reporting today, and of all the things that we've found in the bread, the most concerning, as the First Lady was saying, is glyphosate, and it's otherwise known as Roundup. So very, very, very heavily and commonly used substance as a pesticide, and glyphosate. So again, mostly known as Roundup. It's been in the news a lot with some of the court cases and that kind of thing. But I think that for many people, the court cases have mostly centered on cancer and cancer risk, and the company that manufactures it, they've paid out, I think, billions of dollars in settlements. But ultimately, what does its presence mean for us as Floridians and for us as parents and families? And the evidence overall is just really, really concerning. I mean, this is something that basically doesn't seem to have a safe level of exposure. And I want to tell you that scientifically, that's what the research is saying. So, 80% of Americans have it in their urine. People are chronically exposed to it because it's in so many foods. It's in so many things that use grains, that use corn, that use beans, that use soybeans, that use I think I mentioned corn and wheat. And people were chronically exposed to it. So when it's been studied, what has generally been found is that, it has a lot of really insidious effects, very concerning effects. So one of the things, over these last few decades, we've been hearing more about the gut microbiome and how important that is. Like all these billions and billions of bacteria that live in our gut that somehow have this symbiosis with our body in terms of helping our immune system function properly, affecting our mood, affecting our energy, affecting our sleep. This miracle of life that God has created that's represented in our gut. And one of the insidious things about glyphosate is that it adversely affects, in a meaningful way, our gut microbiome. So that's a major effect that it has. And something else is that it also affects how easily substances pass through our gut. So sometimes you hear things like leaky gut, and there seems to be some relationship with glyphosate exposure and leaky gut. At least as worse as the gut is the brain. So there's good evidence that glyphosate, there's something called the blood-brain barrier, which some people are probably familiar with. And it's this idea that our brain is very protected real estate in our bodies. So whereas substances can move through our bloodstream and enter our different organs straight directly out of our bloodstream, our brain's very different. So our brain really protects what's allowed to pass through the blood into the brain. And thank goodness, right? I mean, we need to protect our brain. This is our, central operating system. This is, so it's essential. And glyphosate actually affects and weakens the blood-brain barrier. So different things are able to pass through there, whether it's heavy metals, other substances, but this just another very concerning thing about it. Not only that, but there's good research that shows a relationship between glyphosate and fatty liver disease. So very common. Again, this is one of these conditions that used to be very rare, maybe only seen in people with diabetes and obesity, but it's incredibly common now to see people with steatosis and fatty liver disease. So there are metabolic effects there. So overall, not only is it bad news, but we fortunately, as the First Lady was saying, guess what? It's not inevitable. There are plenty of brands. Even the Dave's Killer Bread was another one, very, very low. It wasn't undetectable in that one, but much lower than others. But there are options out there. This isn't destiny. There are ways to produce food in ways that that aren't just inherently harmful to our bodies and our health, especially with long-term exposure, which is what we call living, because we have to eat every day, or we should, or we can at least eat every day. People fast. So very, very happy that we're sharing that. Again, it's not inevitable. There are options, and we're happy to be here and providing Florida's families with information about options to really get less of this bad stuff in their bodies. And we're going to keep going. It's very satisfying work to be doing. Thank you. We'll probably leave. I was eyeing this bag of flour here to see, maybe read more about it. It's a challenge, but it's not an insurmountable one. And I'll actually add one more thing. I'll say that one of the things, because unfortunately glyphosate is just so widely used. One of the counter arguments would be that, it's going to be, if we stop using this, or if we reduce how much of this we use, the food system's going to collapse. We don't have a choice but to continue using this. Please remember, that is complete bollocks, okay? There is an alternative to poisoning people. It is not inevitable, okay? Like, it is possible to grow food in a sustainable way that, that doesn't involve folks congesting stuff that makes them sick. So please, when people say that, just know that it's complete nonsense. That for hundreds of years we managed to feed people on the planet without doing it, and this idea that it's inevitable is just it's just nonsense. So, all right, God bless you guys.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Very informative. And I know what's next on the down the pike.
We're keeping it under wraps.
Okay. So stay tuned. You'll want to visit exposingfoodtoxins.com again when the next round comes. And also, just for the record, when Miami Hurricanes were in the national championship game, I did a friendly wager with the governor of Indiana, and my collateral I put up were stone crabs and key lime pie from Joe's in Miami Beach, and I'm announcing that those are going to be en route at the beginning of the week. And it's that it's a time of season. They're very good down there. But just for the record, no testing on key lime. I think it's fine, but I also, if it's not, it gets a pass. And so we just got to work through that for that. So we're going to do that. And, I think we even maybe kicked in a couple extra for their coach, Signetti, who's really done a good job. So he'll have some as well. So anyways, so that bet will be paid. Miami had a great season. I think they're on the upswing for many, many years. I think they're going to start doing really well. Disappointing on that, but Indiana was pretty special this year. So good deal. Okay, has anyone got any questions back there? Yes, ma'am. You can ask me, and then if she wants to come up and answer it, she will.
Have either you or the First Lady received a grand jury presentment, and what did it say about her role at Florida?
I haven't received anything, but I think we said at the beginning it was a political op, it was a hoax, and now that we're at this point, clearly that was true. Our agencies acted in ways that were legally sound and appropriate. That's just the fact, and the fact that you wouldn't even have opened one with DOJ. There was no basis to even do it, I think is really, really telling. It was all a political scam, and there was a political agenda. And it was obviously very partisan media who do this type of thing. But you also had some of these rhino Republicans in the legislature who were trying to do this. And part of it was just to try to smear the First Lady by implication. She wasn't involved in any of the settlement or any of that. I mean, that's just not nonsense. But the media will try to do that because it's just trying to get clicks and trying to smear. So I think like any of the coverage was typically horrific, and it was agenda driven. But this, we obviously knew this. This was an attempt at lawfare to be able to do. What does that say about some of the people who are in this process that they're trying to do weaponization, even on the Republican side? That's the thing. When you have a supermajority, they're really not all Republicans, right? I mean, they have their own agendas, and so that's kind of what we've seen on this. I also think it's important to point out, people would try to say that somehow she has a charity. She does not have a charity. They wanted people to say that there was a donation made to her charity, and she never, not one dime. She wasn't involved in any of that. It's a sanctioned charity for the state of Florida, our Department of Children and Families, and 99% of the money has gone to grants. Nobody got any money. So that whole thing was obviously not true based on the facts, but I think that was kind of what people wanted you to think, that somehow, nobody got money. Certainly she did. And it also shows a lot of ignorance, and especially in the media, because when she launched Hope Florida years ago, it had nothing to do with a charity. It was, we have state agencies. We have an approach that we have to try to improve in terms of how do you lift people up, particularly with child welfare and child poverty. And you can continue doing what's been done for many decades, which is focus on government bureaucracy, handing out checks, and the bureaucrats interfacing with people in need that way. Or you can recognize that, we've got a lot of great resources exterior to government. We have churches. We have charities, we have businesses, we have individuals that want to volunteer. And so the concept of Hope Florida, it's not a bureaucracy, it never costs any money to the taxpayers, was we're going to repurpose those existing government workers, and instead of trying to get people on government assistance, we're going to try to get them linked with some of these groups. And so, you know what, if someone comes in need and the church knows that they need help, church comes and gets them, they're going to be much more likely to have self-sufficiency and to be able to lift themselves up as a result of having people in the community actually care for them, instead of just like an interpersonal, take the check, come back, don't do the check, don't do that. And so that was really, that's what it's all about. Now, the DCF, the foundation, you know, that's to supplement that mission, but that's like 1% of what Hope Florida has done. And that was never, and when we were doing this and when we were having people being helped, you know, a lot of these media organizations who tried to smear, they never even covered this. Like, we literally would have these ladies crying, saying they had nowhere else to turn, and that because of this initiative, they were able to get on their feet because they have this group or that group that came and did it. So what it really is it's the one conservative approach to fighting poverty that actually has shown an ability to work. And so, you know what the left is going to do on that. They want as many people on government assistance as possible. Now, they've been doing that since the 1960s. How has that worked out? Hasn't worked out well. Then you have a lot of people on the right. They have no ideas at all how to tackle these things. They have no approach. Well, this is actually an approach, you know, that worked. And I think a lot of people are threatened by that because we have embraced the faith community, and I'm proud of doing that. You know, they're not going to do that in Oregon or in Massachusetts. That's fine. But here in Florida, we're showing that it works. And so I think it's been very, very successful. And, you know, people, you know, and the work has gone on in spite of, you know, some people trying to throw food fights. And there's been more and more that's been done. So now you have 33,000 people that have eliminated or reduced their dependence on government assistance because you have activated these other organs of society that have been in and have filled this really important role. And that saved the taxpayers, you know, over $100 million as a result of doing that. So that's been a huge success. And then again, you know, our agencies and the settlement agreements they do was all legally sound. That was clear from the beginning. But that whole thing is really just part of 1% of like a much larger effort that has really transformed people's lives from the beginning. And so we're going to continue to do this. We're going to continue to expand, and we're going to continue to work hard to help people.
Did the First Lady testify?
No. Why would she have? She wasn't.
She didn't testify.
Why would she have?
I'm asking you if she did.
I'm asking you, why would she have?
Do you have her involvement with Hope Florida?
She wasn't involved in anything that they were alleging. Zero involvement in anything they were alleging. Now, what they were alleging was BS, but zero involvement, not 1 cent. It wasn't her charity. Some of you people said she had her own charity. She never had her own charity. This is the state of Florida's charity that our Department of Children and Families has, just like our Education Department has a charity, just like our Corrections has a charity, because there are things you can do through that, or they can do through that, that work. And so anytime you guys are trying to link her to that, you're lying to people. You're intentionally trying to smear, because people like you don't like the fact that this is a conservative approach that is embracing the faith community. You don't want the faith community involved in this. That's not where your orientation or your political philosophy. I get it. I understand that. But the reality is what she's done has been very successful. And so any inclination that somehow she was involved in anything is just false. And that's been true from, if you looked at it 5 minutes after this started to make news, anybody who was honest would have said that. And yet I wonder why you can't bring yourself to say the same thing.
Governor
Yes.
DeSantis, do you have any comments on the project known as Project Tango, massive hyperscale AI data center that has been proposed in Palm Beach County within 1,000 feet of the school and 1,000 feet from the residential?
So my position on these data, so I'm like the first one that's been speaking out nationally on it. They use as much power as a city of 500,000 people. Okay, so you generate a certain amount of power. There's a certain demand. If you double the demand, the laws of supply and demand are very simple. The cost is going to go up. we are not going to allow any cost to be imposed on the people of our communities because of hyperscale data centers. Dead end here. That is not going to happen. You also have the issue they don't produce jobs. It's like 10 people run these data centers. And the tech companies, they bring in foreign workers to do it, H-1B probably. And so it's like, why would you want from, and then from an environmental perspective, kind of, they're big, they blot the footprint. So I don't think communities, when they see that, that's going to be something that they're going to sign up for. It's taking a lot of resources from the community. It's not really giving anything in terms of producing jobs, economic base, any of that. You should be producing your own energy if you're going to be using that much. But our ratepayers, cannot be shouldering this burden and then cannot be doing that. We're working on legislation. Well, the legislature is working on legislation that will make it very clear that the people of Florida are protected against that. I hope it passes. I think it will pass. Obviously, I would sign it into law if it did. Yes?
I have a question. I'm not sure if you're aware that Miami-Dade had a deficit of $400 million. We were waiting, the residents, taxpayers were waiting for you to answer the question, I guess, to a town hall meeting. And now all the...
Whoa. Miami-Dade has a deficit?
They had a $400 million deficit and then...
For their county budget?
The county, yes.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, it appeared the money and, there's a lot of back and forth going on in Miami-Dade. And now they're doing a recall on Living Cava. I wanted to know what was your take? What do you think about the recall that's going on?
Well, I don't know about the recall. I mean, obviously, we have been very critical of the amount of spending that's taken place in local governments. I mean, here's just the facts statewide. 2019, if you look at property tax revenue taken by local governments for all different functions, they were taking in $32 billion across the state. This year, it's going to be $60 billion. So that's 7 years. And so the question is why? Well, the reason why, and you guys know in Palm Beach better than anyone, people are coming down. You have home prices have gone up. Now, that market ebbs and flows, and I think we were so hot for a time that we probably got out a little bit. Not that we control it, but I think some of those prices really went up very quickly. But ostensibly, on paper, people have more value. And so that means more taxes. Even if they don't raise the millage, you're paying more taxes on an annual basis. And if you have to sell your home that you've had for a long time and get a new one, your tax base is going to be a lot higher. This is the genesis of why we're doing the property tax and working with the legislature to get that done so that people are protected against that. But what's happened is, so you have all that, but yet it's like some of the local governments have just spent and spent. You should not be running deficits in areas where you've had big time growth and property values have gone up. And so it was 32 billion, now 60. If you went from that 32 billion in 2019 and you adjusted for population growth and inflation, which has happened. I mean, nationwide, we've had 25-30% inflation since 2021. It's been a bad period of inflation. Even though the rate is down from where it was 3-4 years ago, that's cumulative on top of everything that's happened. So that's a legitimate thing to point out, and the population growth is a legitimate thing to point out. But if you adjust for those two things, you still wouldn't get 60 billion. You'd get about 44 billion. And so you have more than that. So that's what's happened with this. And I think when people say, I mean, I don't know, I'll ask this room, would you rather go back to the 2019 levels of spending adjusted for inflation and population growth and then have a homestead property exemption, or would you rather keep spending the money and get no tax relief? I think most people want to see the relief, because I think it's just something that they're working hard, they've got all these different costs, and to be able to own your home without perpetually having to pay tax, that's a big benefit. And the thing is because Florida has so many tourists, because we have people that own second homes, because we have people from, we have wealthy people from like Brazil that own homes and pay tax. we have a tax base that's kind of unique, and we do have the ability to give our residents really historic relief. And so that's kind of what we've seen. So, and I hear from the Miami-Dade reps, I hear from them about what's going on down there. And, you know, it is what it is. And so I don't know on this recall. I know that the Republicans had a chance in 2024, and had they gotten their ducks in a row, they probably could have won that race. They didn't, and so here we are now. Okay, everybody, thank you.